Great. So good evening. My name is Avinoam Pat, and I'm the director of the Center for Judaic Studies and Contemporary Jewish Life at the University of Connecticut. It's a pleasure to welcome you here this evening for our fourth program in a series that is sponsored by the Jewish Hartford European Roots program. This is a series that we've called a virtual festival of Yiddish culture, and we're delighted to welcome our speaker, who many of you already know, a local or formerly local academic here at Wesleyan University, Professor Mark Slobin, who will be speaking on the Yiddish song today. And in a moment, I'll give him a more formal introduction. But before I do that, it's a pleasure to co-sponsor tonight's program with the Maurice Greenberg Center for Judaic Studies at the University of Hartford. And we're very grateful for their support of the program and for helping us to promote this wonderful program. So I'd like to welcome the interim director of the Greenberg Center at the University of Hartford, Regina Miller, to offer a few words of welcome. Regina.
Thank you very much. It's nice to see some familiar faces and new faces. And I think we've been on other webinars for the last couple of months. We've been together. I would just like to welcome you all. Thank you for coming. And it's an honor to co-sponsor this program in the name of the Greenberg Center, and to tell you that there will be information coming forward in the fall about programs that will be co-sponsored between the Greenberg Center for Judaic Studies at University of Hartford and UConn, and we have determined to be remote all semester. As we say in Yiddish, this is the beste Sache.
But even though we are remote, we have a wonderful series of virtual programs that we're working on together, which will be delivered, which will be wonderful programs for the fall semester. I also see here, I think Estelle Kafer is on here, and I want to thank Estelle, who is a wonderful colleague who suggested this idea for a virtual festival for Yiddish culture through Jewish Hartford European Roots. So thank you so much, Estelle. Many of you who signed up for this evening's program, and thank you for registering in advance for the program, will have seen that we also mentioned that we have a fifth program, which is planned as part of the virtual festival of Yiddish culture. We'll take a hiatus in August and give everybody a bit of a Zoom break. And then we will return in September, and the fifth part of the series will feature the wonderful speakers Anna Sternschis and performer Soy Korolenko, who have created an album and a project called Yiddish Glory, and they'll be speaking on Yiddish Glory, which are Yiddish songs from the former Soviet Union created during World War II. So it's really an incredible project, and Anna and Soy will be both speaking and performing in September on September 14th. I'll be sending out more details about that. So this will be a wonderful program which we'll be offering to continue this virtual festival. Now in a moment, I'll introduce Mark Slobin. Before I do that, I just want to mention the format for tonight's program. Professor Slobin will be speaking for approximately 40 minutes, and then we'll be happy to take questions at the end of the program. Many of you are familiar with this already, but you'll see at the bottom of your screen there is the chat function. So if you have questions as Professor Slobin is speaking, you can enter them into the chat function. And we will take questions at the end of the program, or you might think of questions at the end. We're very happy to have a Q&A at the end that will be administered through the chat function. So I'm delighted to be able to welcome Professor Mark Slobin for this virtual festival of Yiddish culture. I really can't think of anyone better to talk about Yiddish music and the world of Yiddish music than Professor Slobin. Many of you know Mark Slobin is a scholar and an ethnomusicologist who has written extensively on Eastern European Jewish music and klezmer music, and for many years was a professor of music and American Studies at Wesleyan University. He was the president of the Society for Ethnomusicology, as well as the Society for Asian Music. He has published extensively, and if you look through his CVs, there are so many books. I'll just mention a few. Chosen Voices, The Story of the American Cantorate, Tenement Songs, The Popular Music of Jewish Immigrants, Fiddler on the Move, Exploring the Klezmer World, American Klezmer, Its Roots and Offshoots. I could go on, but it's a very, very long list of wonderful publications on the world of Jewish music and Yiddish music. So it's wonderful to welcome to our Zoom living rooms today, Professor Mark Slobin, to be speaking on the Yiddish song today. Professor Slobin.
Thanks, Avi. It's great to be back in Connecticut. I retired to New York, and I can be in Connecticut while it's 100 degrees out here, and we're all able to sit at home and enjoy a lecture. It's quite the pleasure. And I have good memories of the Hartford community going back decades, so when I used to give some talks there too. I'm really excited about issues of the Yiddish song today. That's why I decided to do this instead of an historical survey or something like that, because it's an amazing moment right now. Lots of things are happening in the Hasidic world. Of course, they never stop singing Yiddish songs, and they're making up new songs. But for the secular Jewish world, it's a particularly interesting moment. And I've been doing a lot of interviews lately, so it's very much on my mind. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give a little background framing for 5 or 10 minutes. Then we're going to listen to 4 songs that are all extremely recent. We're going to look at the text first, and then we'll look at the, we'll listen to the performances, and I'll introduce each one as we go. And then we'll have time to kind of summarize that as we go along. So about the Yiddish song, where does it come from? To do this very, very quick thumbnail sketch. As you know, Yiddish is one of many Jewish languages around the world. Wherever the Jews lived in scattered communities, they kept to their own traditions, and they created an everyday language. And Yiddish is that language for the Northern and Eastern European Jews of Europe, who we call the Ashkenazi. The history of Yiddish is still being discussed and disputed, and there's more books still coming out with different theories about how Yiddish started and evolved. But for many of you, it's close to what Yiddish calls itself, a Mama Lashon, the language of home, mom's language, the mother tongue. So it is, however, songs are just part of an incredibly rich variety of oral expressive culture that the Ashkenazic Jews have. It's richer than any of the other Jewish cultures. There are more versions of this kind of oral expression and kinds of musical outlets than you see elsewhere. Every single day, people are chanting, performing sacred text in a very, is that music or is it not? We have the Emeritus around the table on Friday night. We have Havdalah. We have cantorial music. We have the Nigun, the Hasidic tradition. We have folk songs sung by girls and young women, often very poignant. And I'm doing a whole website about an analytical website on the Yiddish folk song, which will be out in a couple of weeks, which has been a really, really interesting project. And it goes on and on. Now, in the conditions of modernity, which starts, in the late 19th century, let's say, with rail traffic, and then with the new media of the Yiddish theater, with print and printed sources, with popular entertainment, and then all of that being carried over to other countries through the vast emigration of these Eastern Ashkenazim, we have an explosion of Yiddish song in many kinds of formats. However, the older folk song kind of faded away because of the new entertainments, which were on recordings, in sheet music, and played at home on pianos. And then we get radio, and then we get the Second Avenue theaters, which actually start in the 1880s, before it was even Second Avenue. And we get all kinds of forms of urban popular entertainments, both in Europe and in the US, and of a very lively interchange between Europe and America, which we tend to forget, that the old country was not the old country. It was a place you went and until 1939. With the liquidation of those communities, with the end of immigration to the United States, definitively in 1924, you don't get new Yiddish speakers coming into this country, and Yiddish becomes more and more and more of a memory. And after World War II, it falls into a really strange zone of that Jeff Chandler, who was a wonderful cultural historian, has called the post-vernacular era of Yiddish. In the post-vernacular era, people aren't using it as a daily language. They're using it to say things that kids won't understand. They're using it for comedy shticks and routines in the Borscht Belt. And it becomes not a language that you're going to produce new material in all kinds of different formats that used to exist before. So I should mention the particularly important development of the Yiddish song was in the realm of social and ideological movements. These also declined in this period. We had the Bund, we had socialism, we had huge workers' choruses in America. I myself sang in the People's Chorus, Jewish People's Chorus in Detroit. Still in the 1950s, that existed when I was small. I could sing in that chorus and do Yiddish songs. That's another kind of thing that faded. So by the time we get to, say, Fiddler on the Roof in the early 1960s, when they mounted that show, the instruction was very, very strict that there would never be a word of Yiddish spoken on stage because it would bring down the level of the show. Okay, that's Jerome Robbins was furious when Zero Mostel would throw in a Yiddish word because he got bored without throwing in a little Yiddish. So that was the status of the language in the post-vernacular era had really changed. In the mid-1970s, and not to mention Zionism, which in Israel, Yiddish was actively suppressed and was supposed to be forgotten. So that was not a place where it was going to flourish except in a very small way by people who would come from Europe. So that wasn't happening either. And Zionism fostered a whole culture of songs in Hebrew and so forth and so on. So by the mid-1970s, not much was happening, and there's this revitalization and energy of among young people who were coming from an instrumental music tradition. They were playing jazz, they were playing bluegrass, they were playing classical music, they were playing old-timey music, they were playing Balkan folk music, and they invented what at the time began to be called the klezmer revival. The klezmer revival was largely instrumentally based. There was not a lot of room for Yiddish songs in the klezmer revival, with few exceptions. Some left-wing, a few left-wing songs from the old days, and a few nuggets from Second Avenue, things like Romania, Romania, and Mein Städtler Bells, occasionally Kier, and by Mir Bist der Sing. But basically, the Yiddish song was not the focus of this revival. So this meant that people were not doing much with it, and it tended to kind of go farther and farther into the background of history. By the post-revival phase of the 1990s, when this revival is already 15 years old, let's say, people started looking into the Yiddish song and getting interested in the Yiddish song again. They founded all these workshops and summer programs. Klez Camp was the first in 1986, then there's Klez Canada, and there's Yiddish Summer Weimar in Germany, and there's the London Klezmer Festival. And all these things begin to generate courses in Yiddish language alongside performance and instruction and things like that. And people bring their kids to Klez Camp, and then the kids, some of those kids actually grow up hearing this music. So by the time we get into the 21st century, there's the possibility of a core of people who might be interested in the Yiddish song in different ways than we'd ever quite seen before, okay? Particularly, I would point out Adrienne Cooper Gordon, who was a great teacher and mentor and singer in the Yiddish song tradition. And she attracted people to that. I should mention Ethel Rehm, whom I've been working with, is a great musical activist and an extraordinary knowledgeable person of the old folk song tradition, which she began to sing and to teach again just in the last 10 years or so. So now what's happening is this, and that's what I'm going to explain and present to you. There is a resurgence of interest, a revitalization within the idea of the Yiddish song of people as young as Generation Z, people in their 20s and early 30s who are doing really interesting experimentation with the idea of the Yiddish song. And we're going to look at 4 examples of very recent material. As I say, I've been doing these interviews, so I have some sense of where they're coming from. 2 of these examples will be from America, 2 of them actually of musicians resident in Berlin. What happened was the American klezmer movement took the music and the energy to Europe, and there's a strong, firm basis for interest in this materials now in Europe, particularly in Germany, for reasons we could talk about if we have time later. Okay, so I'm going to do these 4 songs and explain each one and why I'm presenting it to you. The first one is really far out, and this is very new, and it bowled me away when I saw this video. I could not believe it. So let me explain. When I did my book, Tenement Song, The Popular Music of the Jewish Immigrants, came out in 1982. The book is mostly about the pop music that the immigrants created from the 1880s to the 1920s. Pop music in Yiddish. We're not talking about Irving Berlin, George Gershwin, forget it. They left the community. These are the people who stayed in, wrote songs. These songs were consumed in large quantities by the Lower East Side Jews, and they went back to Europe, many of these songs as well. I couldn't believe the range of topics of these songs and how audacious, funny, socially relevant, and entertaining they were. And that's why, essentially, I wrote the book. One of the songs I stumbled on, I could not actually believe. I said, what is this song about? It's called Menschenfresser, which means cannibals, man-eaters. Okay? I said, what? Why is there a Yiddish song called Menschenfresser? Well, it turns out this is a song about disease. It's actually a song about tuberculosis. How many world songs are there in any tradition about tuberculosis? I don't know a single one, American popular song, a Victorian ballad, or any place else except this song. And the song is literally addressed to the microbes and bacilli. Okay, what do you want from us? Why are you sucking the marrow? Which is the first time this thing has been done in public in the last basically 100 years. Okay, so can we get the number 1 up there? We'll get our tech going to show you the music.
So you froze for 1 minute for me, Mark. Do you want me to play the song or do the?
No, we want the text. With number 1, I mean, I numbered them 1 to 8, so it's number 1 on your list. There we go. Oh, it's way out of focus. Oh, this I did not expect. Wow. Let's see, I wonder if there's a way. We can maybe barely get this on the left side. In den Lungen tief begraben. That's better. Wohnt die Blasepest, die Mikroben, die Bazillen, Beulen, See und Nest, fressen unser Leib und Leben, furchtbar und sich peck, und wir müssen Salz verschweben, fahr der Zeit weg. This is set to a beautiful melody. It has a verse and a chorus. They're both excellent melodies, and you'll hear how they can be performed. Deeply buried in the lungs is the pale plague. The bacilli and the microbes build their nest. They eat our bodies and lives and multiply. The angel of death lives in our hearts. Now, there's a next verse, which I'll just, the bottom line, which is very surprising because it talks about Kepgekointe Diplomaten. I'm saying crowned heads and diplomats who are also listed as man-eaters. So there's a socially conscious verse. This is very typical of this period. They start with one topical theme, and then they expand it to other areas of society. These are social commentaries, folk songs, okay? Which are not folk songs, they're pop songs in this period. And they talk about how this song is written during World War I, okay? It's 1960. So we're talking about the crowned heads and the diplomats that send us out to be cannon fodder. They are also man-eaters, okay? So we're fast forwarding from 1916 to 2020. And we have a video here, a beautifully made video. I mean, it's stunning. And I'll play the whole thing for you. It's 4.5 minutes. And the people in this video, we're going to get to know some of them in the second song as well. Sveta Kundish and Patty Farrell. Sveta is from Russia. Patty is from America. They live in Berlin. And the other main singer is Dan Kahn. Dan Kahn is from Detroit, my hometown. And he lives in Berlin, and he does Yiddish cabaret, Yiddish political cabaret, like in Berlin as if it was 1926 and it was Weimar Germany. So they collaborated on a beautifully produced song because what do we have now? A plague, right? So they said, there's a Yiddish plague song. We've got to make a beautiful video of it. So, and the text is there for you to follow. And I think I'm just going to run it. And then, and I think you'll enjoy this. Mention Fletcher 2020.
Vor schreckliche Mageife geht von Land zu Land, mit der Schnellkeit von a Streife, von a Feuerbrand.
Machtlos ist dem Menschen Sinnen, es bleibt die Chochme still. Es ist kein Mittel zu gewinnen, gegen a Bazil.
Mikroben, Bazillen, was wilt ihr? Sagt, wem Scheliches der fehlt ihr? Ihr fresst die Korbones, Gorona Rachmones, in blühende Leben, dort zielt ihr.
Ihr bohrt sich in Tränen von Weinen. Ihr zieht euch dem Mark von die Beine. Ihr samt die Gederim, ihr kriechende Werim, Mikroben, Bazillen, was wilt ihr?
Die Lungen tief vergraben, und die Blase fest. Die Bazillen, die Mikroben, bauen sehr nest. Fressen unser Leib und Leben, fruchtbaren sich weg. Und wir müssen selbst verschweben, vor der Zeit weg.
Und wir fühlen, wie wir gehen still und langsam aus. Und die Schmerzen und die Wehen sind schrecklich groß. Und die finstere Machschobes pressen dem Schmerz. Joren liegt der Malchambobes tief bei uns im Haus. Mikroben, Bazillen,
Was wilt ihr? Sagt, wem es Scheliches der fehlt ihr?
ihr fresst die Korbones, Corona, Rachmanes, in liehende Leben, dort zielt ihr. Ihr bohrt sich in Tränen von Weinen. Ihr zieht euch dem Mark von die Beine.
Ihr sagt, die Gederim, ihr kriechende Werim, Mikroben, Bazillen, was wilt ihr?
Happy enough. That's fine. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I thought we might be getting the captions, but we didn't get the subtitles for some reason. And I think you get the idea. It's very ingenious of them to find this old footage of from period footage of TB and to do this elegant outdoors black and white, old looking video. I thought it was remarkably creative, and it's a kind of thing that is happening these days with Yiddish song. And the cycle here is a kind of cycle you get with these kinds of materials. The song came out in 1916. I got it in the 1970s. I published it 1982. And they have it from not an original recording even, and not from anybody who sang it to them. They have it from my publication. They then went back and found the text, the full text, which were able to get off the sheet music, and did their arrangement of it and made this production. So this kind of circulation pattern is very typical of Yiddish materials, which go in and out of literacy, print, oral tradition in a whole lot of different ways. in a complicated kind of modern dance that the music relates to. So that's the first one I want to show you. For the second one is a very different approach, but it's also Sveta Kundis and Patty Farrell in this case. This is what you'd call a Yiddish art song. Now, what is an art song? An art song is something you usually go to a concert hall to hear. It's like Schubert or something like that. The Yiddish art song has a very interesting tradition. Yiddish concert music, the idea that you could take Yiddish from the streets and from the houses and from the shtetl and make it into a concert music had to be an invented idea in modernity. It's invented around 1908. They set up the Society for Jewish Music in St. Petersburg. And a number of extremely well-educated conservatory graduates take it on themselves to write Jewish concert music. So these could be piano pieces, they could be quartets, and a lot of them, though, are what we would call art songs. An art song takes poetry, usually, some kind of quality poetry, and sets it in a quality kind of high culture way, with a piano often as that kind of tradition. So the Yiddish song moves into that channel, partly because so many Jews are concert musicians by the 1910. They are turning out to be the top virtuosi and conservatory graduates in Europe. This song, so Patty and Sveta are doing, I think, some of the best new art songs. This is set to a poem by Rivka Basman Ben Chaim, and she is now 95. She is still alive in Israel, writing poems. And she is a Holocaust survivor, came to Israel in 1947, and despite Israeli society's antipathy to Yiddish, she carried on with that, and now she has been recognized by the Israeli government, and so a different attitude is going on. So this is another old genre of Yiddish song that is being rethought, and I think it's a very beautiful setting. So we're going to look at the text. If you could put up the text. Okay, here's the text. Maybe you can go down just a bit so we can get the whole text. Let's see, maybe. Wer hat gesehen, sich kuschen der Zweig mit der Zweig, a Liebschaft, sah es nicht zu gefinnen. Der glückliche Wind räumt ein dem Beginnen, als ruhig so wären, a Vogel entläuft und lässt sich lieben. This is a romantic song. Who has seen the kiss of a branch with a branch? The joyful wind whispers to the dawn, a bird flies off. This is in this deep silence, the kiss of a branch with a branch. This is a pastoral song that's suggesting a human love, and it's very lyrical, written by a woman poet. A lot of the things people are setting these days are songs by Yiddish women poets who've only been rediscovered in the last, recent years. There are a number of very powerful modern Yiddish poets who are women. So I think we'll play this, and I think you'll appreciate how beautifully Patty and Sveta have set this poem as a concert piece. Okay, this is from just a few months old. The song is a few months old. The performance is just a few months old. Notice both of those two things we looked at. It's an accordion. It's not an instrument that you think of. The accordion is extremely flexible. To use it for composing art music. Patty Farrell is not Jewish. He does many other kinds of music, and he was drawn into this Jewish world by his interest in this, and of course by his partner, Sveta, who was also from Russia and did not grow up with all that much Yiddish either. So there's a way that people are being drawn into a Yiddish music nexus that's kind of interesting. And they live in Berlin, okay? So this is a cosmopolitan international movement I'm talking about. The third song we're going to listen to is also a lyric song. It's written by a young woman. This is Ada Hetko, who lives in Boston now. Young. She's like one of the youngest in this crowd. She's still in her 20s as far as I know. And she has came to Yiddish late. She studied it in many of these workshops and camps and things. At the Yiddish Book Center in Amherst and so forth. And she was just totally delighted with Yiddish. And she's very enthusiastic and very smart and very musical. Now, brings us to her version of a song, which is actually her own song. This is one where she's written the words and the music, and it's called Margarikelach Onanek, Daisies Without End. Okay, now why daisies? There's a famous Yiddish song that some of you may know called Margarikelach. It's a very beautiful song. It was sung a lot around the house when I was a kid. I knew that song. It's about, but it's a modern song. It's written by, in the 20th century by a poet. This is typical of the Yiddish song tradition. Things become folklorized. They turn into folk songs very, very quickly, and nobody even knows that somebody wrote that song. They think of them as folk songs. And Margarikelach is one of those. Now, today, the song is understood to be problematic, which didn't occur to me till this generation of young, progressively minded activists told me these kinds of things. I'm not used to thinking about Margarikelach that way. It's a song about a girl who's seduced and abandoned in the forest. She goes to the forest, this boy comes through, seduces her, and leaves her alone in the forest. Now, that was understood to be kind of romantic when I was a kid. Now it's understood to be sexual assault. And so nobody really wants to sing Margarikelach. And instead, Ada wrote her own Margarikelach song, which is a personal lyrical song about love, using the image of daisies. She liked the word, she liked the idea. So let's look at the text of her Margarikelach. There's the Yiddish. And it's written in the standard form of Yiddish verses, 4 lines, and the rhyme of the second and fourth lines tend to rhyme. This is standard for Yiddish art poetry and for a lot of Yiddish songs, the quatrain and the ABCB or ABAD rhyme scheme. Let's go down and see the English, which should be there. Yeah. I used to be in the bright valley where the sun shone strong. We went swimming in the cool river. There were daisies growing there, endless daisies and summer and love. This is kind of, a summer of love song. It's very nice for a summertime song for us, I think now. You don't know what's coming, you only have today is perhaps a little more ominous. In the evening, we built a fire and I sat near my dear ones and found the sweetness that I need. It's, I think the style in which this is written, absolutely a totally different style than we just heard. It's an American kind of folk, rock, pop song style. And she's just singing at home. I think her dad is playing along with her. Here's Ada's Margarikelach Onanek.
Rolling that. Okay. You ready?
this is very much in folk revival tradition, but why not? The Yiddish song can contain everything. And then this is a very different format and example. I want to finish with one more if we still have time. We have time for one more, okay. So I mentioned the ideology and political function of the Yiddish song and how when I was small, I actually sang it in Jewish people's chorus. You'd think that would have vanished altogether. Instead, there is an actual revival of this sort of singing and this way of thinking. A lot of the young people who are engaged in this Yiddish song world right now are quite leftist, very progressive types. In Brooklyn, you can find hundreds of them, and they support various social causes. One of the interesting things that's happened is that what used to be the workman's circle, which they now call the workers' circle, because it's more correct, the workers' circle has suddenly had a resurgence. And there are actually schools with small children, not many, but a few small children are being brought up in Yiddish and going to workers' circle schools and singing songs. So in Boston, there is a workers' circle chorus, which is a 100-year-old tradition. And there's a woman called Linda Gritz who was not young and who is, however, doing new songs for this chorus. And some of them are very politically progressive. This one is more consciousness raising about roots, about finding your roots. A lot of the people like Ada and people way up through older people are doing this roots orientation as part of their Yiddish identity. So she wrote a song called Wurzel und Flügel, how you have to have roots as well as wings. You can't live without both roots and wings. Wurzel und Flügel. So we'll look at the text. The only performance she has of it, there are a bunch of, you can go online and see some really nice polished performances of the Boston Workers' Circle chorus. But I wanted this particular song, and she only had one version, which is kind of rehearsal. So the sound quality isn't terrific. And but my idea is that if we play this, you'll catch on and sing in the refrain, because it's very simple. Wurzel und Flügel is all you have to know. It's like 3 words, okay? Can you all say this? Wurzel und Flügel, okay? Roots and wings. Beide gleich, both together. Wurzel und Flügel, Berg und Teich, the mountain and the river. So you need the mountain and the river. Without the roots, you can't find a path. Without a wings, you're going to have aimless days. So, and this is a didactic, organizing text, which is deeply Yiddish in the Yiddish tradition of the modernity. So let's listen to a little bit. And as I say, as it goes along, maybe you can sing along with Wurzel und Flügel. It's really easy to do. That's the idea.
Wurzel und Flügel, Wurzel und Flügel, Wurzel und Flügel, beide gleich. Wurzel und Flügel, Wurzel und Flügel, Wurzel und Flügel, Berg und Teich. Und nach Wurzel ist doch kein Weg, und nach Flügel und selige Tag. Wurzel und Flügel, Wurzel und Flügel, Wurzel und Flügel, beide gleich. Wurzel und Flügel, Wurzel und Flügel,
Okay. Okay, I hope you were all singing along, or you should all unmute now and we should all sing it. Like, you can remember that tune, right? It's a wonderful, catchy tune. It's in minor, okay? So many Yiddish songs are in minor, and it's not because they're sad. It's because Jews like the sound of that particular kind of tune. There's this idea of like, all Jewish songs are sad. This is not a sad song. This is a hopeful song. It's a song of possible social progress, okay? Notice the guitar is used here, and it's a folk revival kind of guitar, folk guitar background there. So that's carries over from the Marguerite song. We're in an American world with a kind of American musical means. So I think I've gone a little over my, or close to my 40 minutes, and maybe we can have a discussion. I hope I've given you some idea of, all of these songs are from within the last year, I mean, the last few months. So you can see what kind of energy there is out there, and kind of creativity and thoughtfulness across several generations that are trying to find new ways to express themselves as artists, musicians, and as community people in Yiddish. I've been very surprised by this and really quite delighted that we're seeing this happening in our times. So I think I'll knock off there.
Wonderful.
And give it back to Avi.
Good. Thank you so much, Mark. This was really fascinating. And please, yeah, there's a round of applause, a silent round of applause going for your wonderful lecture and sharing the music as well. And please type questions into the chat, and we have time for Q&A. I'm going to scroll up and ask some of the questions that have come in as you've been speaking. So Marshall asks a question: what do you think of Paula Vogel's play concerning Shalom Asch's play, The God of Vengeance? If you're...
It had great music. I was most interested in the music, and that was done by Lisa Gutkin, who was in the Classmatics. She did, I thought the music was the best part, frankly. I mean, the show was okay. I thought it was slightly off kilter in certain times, but I thought the music really made that show. And it's another good example of recent creativity where Lisa tapped into a lot of root stuff to give a period flavor. Theater is another way that people have been doing this. Dan Kahn, whom you saw, the cabaret artist, he does very theatrical stuff. And there are more kind of theatricals coming that draw on this tradition, yeah.
And it's interesting, I think a number of people here probably, you referenced Fiddler on the Roof in the beginning, and sort of Jerome Robbins putting the kibosh on Zero Mostel using any Yiddish, but we note the popularity of sort of the Yiddish version of Fiddler auf dem Dach.
Yeah.
And what did you think of the music that was rendered in Yiddish in the show, or did you just see it as sort of a strict translation of the Broadway musical into Yiddish lyrics?
What blew me away about that was the Yiddish libretto. The Yiddish book is so much better than Sheldon Harnick's book. I mean, it's really, it was done in the early 60s in Israel, and it never got anywhere. Israel was not interested in it. They thought it was weird. And it holds up so beautifully, his translation. It gives you a window, a way back, a road back to the original Shalom Aleichem stories. Fiddler on the Roof does a fairly, a really, what should I say, sometimes shocking revision of Shalom Aleichem. And to see it feels more original. It feels more like Shalom Aleichem in that show. And they did a really good job with the music, I thought, in giving it. But it's now something different. And this, again, is a new idea. Let's take American canon and turn it into Yiddish. And not only that, we can sell it to a large audience and really do. People wanted this. And that was another symptom of this kind of revitalization of Yiddish. It's not comedy anymore. It's not Zero Mostel, and it's not the English fiddler. It's another product, and it's a Yiddish product.
Yeah, it's fascinating. There is an audience, and it was extended from the Volksbühne, and then they had to move it to 42nd Street, and they had to extend it. So clearly the audience is there. You alluded in your introduction, you alluded to sort of what happens to Yiddish culture, Yiddish language, and also Yiddish music in Israel in the early post-war period. And Anat asks or mentions that when we were growing up in Israel, we were taught many Yiddish songs that were adapted to Hebrew.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if you can comment a little bit on sort of that
Yeah.
folk, the adopting of the Yiddish folk song tradition, which is translated into Hebrew, and then also what's the current scene like in Israel in terms of sort of Yiddish music in Israel today?
Well, when they got what was before Israel, I mean, you know, in the Mandate times, they needed a kind of music culture. And there wasn't a music culture. These Jews came from everywhere. And so what were they going to do? Sing Arab songs? There was some move to orientalize things, but they found it very convenient to take nice Hamish tunes from people like the Hasidim. I mean, that's what Hava Nagila is, okay? It's a Hasidic tune. It's written in Israel in 1917 by a guy who had come from there and used a Hasidic tune. And we think of it, that's the arch, you know, Israeli song, right? And it's in Hebrew. So a lot of Israelis did not know this fact. It simply became their national song because it was a handy source. And then, of course, they eventually created more songs that do have local resonance and more Mediterranean flavor, and you know, and Israeli song moves on. But you didn't go around saying, oh, you know, all these songs are Yiddish. You know, it was not a sort of a popular point of view probably for a long time. Today, there is a little more respect for Yiddish, but not a lot. One of the people I talked to is a very interesting woman who was Polish, but she moved to Israel. She grew up as Polish, non-Jewish, discovered the Yiddish song because all the songwriters in 1930s Warsaw, like all the songwriters in America in the 1930s and in France and in Germany, were Jews. And so all the hit songs and cabaret and tangos in Warsaw were written by Jews. She was amazed by this, and she sang that very well. You can see her on doing that repertoire beautifully. She moved to Israel because she really wanted to be there. And I talked to her lately, and she says it's still, she can't do a concert of Yiddish songs in Israel. It just isn't something that people, so she does it in Poland. Okay. I mean, there is some stuff going on, and there is a kind of klezmer movement, which is a whole other topic than we're talking about today.
Right, specifically sort of the Yiddish, an interest in Yiddish language and culture and music directly. And I think this connects to the next question, which Barbara asks, to what do you attribute this recent interest? And you're alluding to that there's sort of different motivating factors in different parts of the world.
Right.
So in the American context, for example, what do you think what are you seeing in the younger generation, the Generation Z, for example? What sort of identity might they be seeking in Yiddish music today?
Well, I'm not sure I have a complete answer yet because I'm still talking to people and I'm still surprised by it. This is an identitarian moment in American society. We have Black Lives Matter, and then like, yes, but who am I? You know, so I have to be somebody too. And so wait, I think, oh, I'm Jewish, right? What does that mean? You know, and it doesn't mean any more birthright and going to Israel to these young people. They're interested, a lot of these people, I mean, I don't want to generalize, but there are a lot of people who are very politically progressive going into this. And there's a lot of gay and queer culture connected to this, which is not traditional to Yiddish culture and Yiddish song, but is traditional, but what you can find in the 1990s that started happening with ACT UP and some klezmer people involved in ACT UP and things like that. And that strand is being picked up by a lot of these young people who are post-gender, gender fluid, queer, or whatever. They find the Yiddish tradition to be open and progressive from their standpoint in 2020. And that's kind of a wrinkle that's a little different than you might have imagined. And so within that world, and some of the really good klezmer people in that world are not just not interested in Zionism, they're really anti-Zionist. I mean, they're seriously anti-Zionist. So they're not finding the solution to their identity at all through Israel. And they are finding it through some things that they find that they can use, that are usable. We always talk about the search for a usable past, and his famous book, the Search for a Usable Jewish Past. That's what the past is for you to find things that you can use. So people cherry pick the past, they take things they find they're interesting and integrate them into their lives today. The klezmer movement was doing that, and that's there's a chapter in Fiddler Around the Move exactly about this, the mixed motivations of people who become klezmer musicians. Why are they doing this? So I'm just sort of beginning to sort this out for some of these people, but it has to do with a current identity quest on personal issues here, as along with the idea of community and progressive issues.
Excellent. So because this is research in progress, I think it means that we'll have to have you back when you find the answer to the question for the next lecture. So I want to thank you so much for a really wonderful program,
yeah.
Very engaging, and sharing wonderful music with us. And someone asked if we can share the titles and the artists of the songs. So yes, I will be able to share that with you, and Mark has shared that with me. And
yeah, Ada's song I don't have for distribution. She just gave it to me privately.
But I'll share the names.
The others
of the
are on
songs.
YouTube. Well, you can see a lot of the Worker Circle things, Boston Worker Circle chorus on YouTube, and the first two are just regular YouTubes you could send.
Great, yeah. So thank you so much. Thank you to the Maurice Greenberg Center for Judaic Studies for co-sponsoring tonight, and thank you to Estelle Kafer and Jewish Hartford European Roots for sponsoring this entire series. And it's wonderful to see everyone, and everyone sei gesund und stark. Continue to avoid the Menschenfresser, wear a mask,
Right.
and we'll see you all very soon. So be well, everyone. Thank you so much, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Bye.